The dusk came slow, thick with silence and the scent of dry sage. Wind moved across the plains in low, steady breaths, the kind that seemed to whisper stories to the bones of the land. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote cried out, a single, sharp note that echoed like a question unanswered. Elijah Callahan rode along the fence line with his shoulders hunched into his coat, though the evening wasn't cold. He wasn't a man of many words, nor one for rushing things. He knew the land and its moods. He knew the way the shadows shifted just before something changed. Tonight felt different. He hadn't meant to ride past the old Kessler place. The house had stood empty since the war, nothing left but leaning boards and a roof that bowed like a grieving back. Folks didn't go near it. Some said it was cursed. Others simply forgot it was there. But Elijah, he noticed the little things, like how the weeds around the porch had been crushed recently, how the birds didn't sing near the chimney, how the wooden gate, though half-rotted, was shut. He dismounted, letting his boots find the dirt with quiet purpose. His horse, Josie, pawed the ground once and stilled. Elijah laid a hand on her neck, then stepped through the gate. The boards of the porch groaned under his weight. The air smelled of old rot and something else, faint, metallic, like rust or dried blood. He paused at the door. It hung askew, as if someone had left in a hurry or not at all. He pushed it open with 2 fingers, letting the hinges speak their complaint. The house swallowed him whole. Inside, the dust was ankle-thick, undisturbed except for a trail, faint, shallow marks in the filth, like something had been dragged. Not fresh, but not old either. The parlor was bare but for a broken chair and a fireplace blackened with time. A single beam of dying sunlight spilled through the shuttered window, catching on motes that hung like ghosts in the air. Elijah followed the marks, his boots careful on the warped boards. The trail ended at a corner beneath a torn rug, where the floor looked just wrong enough to notice. Boards too square, the nails too clean. He crouched, pulled the rug back, and there it was, a cellar door. He stood over it a long moment. The kind of long where you hear your own breath and wonder if it's the last normal sound you'll ever make. Then he reached for the iron ring and pulled. The door yawned open with a breathless groan. Stale, damp air climbed up from the darkness. He lit a match. The flicker danced over steps that descended into shadow, into earth. He didn't speak, didn't call out. He just stepped down into the dark, slow and measured, each board creaking like it could snap beneath him. The match died halfway. He lit another. That's when he saw her, chained to the wall, in the farthest corner, curled like something forgotten. Her skin was pale, too pale, and her dress was no more than rags. Her arms were thin, wrists raw beneath iron shackles. Her hair fell in thick snarls around her face, hiding her like curtains in a ruined home. But her eyes, sweet Lord, her eyes, wide, hollow, a color he couldn't name, something between stormwater and ash. They looked right through him. She didn't scream, didn't beg, just blinked, slowly, as if unsure he was real. Elijah said nothing. He moved closer, holding the match high. Her lips parted, cracked and trembling. Don't, she rasped. Don't touch the chain. His hand stopped inches from the shackle. I ain't here to hurt you, he said, his voice rough with disuse. She flinched anyway, the iron clinking as she drew back. He saw it now, how the chain had been bolted to the stone behind her, how old blood stained the floor. This wasn't a prison built by law. This was cruelty made personal. I'll get it off, he said, more to himself. Her body tightened like a spring. He reached into his coat, found his pocket knife. It wouldn't do much, but it was something. The chain was rusted, brittle in spots. It had been there a long time. He pressed his blade against the thinnest link and sawed. The girl turned her face away. Minutes passed, maybe more. Then a snap. The chain dropped, sudden and loud. The girl gasped and fell forward, not in fear but collapse, her legs giving out. Elijah caught her. Her body weighed less than it should have, but it was warm. He wrapped his coat around her, gently as wrapping a newborn, careful not to pull too tight. I got you, he murmured. She didn't answer, just let her head rest against his chest, eyes open and unblinking. The way back up was slower. He carried her like a memory he couldn't let slip, one step at a time. Back through the cellar door, across the parlor, out into the last stretch of sunlight. Josie startled when she saw the bundle in Elijah's arms, but didn't move. The girl stirred then, just a little, looking up at the sky as if it were something she'd forgotten existed. "It's still blue," she whispered. Elijah nodded. "Always was." He mounted with her across the saddle, an arm around her shoulders. She didn't resist, didn't cry, just held on with hands that trembled but didn't let go. They rode west, toward the hills and the house that waited with its single candle in the window. Behind them, the Kessler house stood quiet. Until a curtain moved, just a breath of it, barely enough to see. But Elijah saw, and he did not look back, not even once. The wind died sometime in the night. What followed was a stillness so complete it felt sacred, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Elijah rode in silence, the girl cradled against his chest, her weight shifting with every hoofbeat. The moon cast pale light over the land, silvering the tops of the sage and the dust trails in their wake. The hills opened to a small valley, and nestled within it stood a modest cabin, its shape softened by time but sturdy, like its owner. He dismounted without words. She stirred, eyelids fluttering but not yet lifting. Her breath was shallow, almost soundless, like she hadn't learned how to breathe deeply anymore. Elijah carried her up the steps, one hand on the doorframe to steady himself, the other holding her close. The old door creaked open into warmth, a fire still glowing in the hearth, the smell of coffee long since gone cold. He laid her gently on the cot near the fireplace, pulled a wool blanket over her frame, then set about kindling fresh heat. She didn't move, not even when the wood crackled and spat into flame. For hours, Elijah sat in the rocking chair by the fire, watching her. She slept like someone unsure if sleep was allowed. No sound, no shifting, just breath and bones, still and small. Morning light bled slowly through the windows, washing the room in soft gold. When she finally opened her eyes, they didn't dart or startle. They simply fixed on his with a gaze clear and direct. "I thought I'd dreamed you," she said, voice raw as wind over gravel. "You didn't." She looked down at her hands. They shook faintly. She hid them beneath the blanket. "Where am I? My land. My house. You're safe here." The girl exhaled, and it was the sound of a lifetime being released all at once. He made her tea from the dried mint he kept in a jar above the sink. She drank with both hands, and he watched the way her fingers curled around the cup, like they didn't trust it not to disappear. That first day, she said little else. She didn't ask about the chain, didn't explain why she'd been there. Elijah didn't ask either. Not yet. Instead, he moved slow, replaced the rusted lock on the front door with a new one, then handed her the key. She didn't speak, but her fingers closed around it tight, as if it were a weapon. By the third morning, she wandered out to the porch, watching the horses graze under a rising sun. She didn't step past the threshold, just stood with one foot inside and one out, like someone afraid the land would swallow her whole. "What do you call them?" she asked, nodding at the animals. "That one's Josie. The rest don't got names. Never stayed long enough to earn one." She nodded, eyes thoughtful. "Elijah," she said, testing the name like a stone in her mouth. "That's yours." He tipped his hat in answer. "And yours?" She hesitated, swallowed. Then, "Mara." It came soft but firm, like it had weight. Elijah nodded. "Good name." She stared at the field a moment longer. "It used to feel like mine." And with that, she turned and went back inside. The days folded into one another, quiet as falling snow. Mara began to move through the house like a shadow learning to take form. She swept without being asked, cooked simple food without a word, kept her back to walls, never standing with her hands at her sides. Sometimes at night, Elijah would hear her cry, not loud, not breaking, but muffled, like sorrow trying not to disturb the silence. He never said a thing, just left a mug of warm milk on the table, every night, without fail. One afternoon, he found her out by the corral, watching the horses. "I never rode," she said, not looking at him. "Never got the chance. Would you like to?" She was quiet a long time. Then, "I think I need to remember how it feels. To move by choice." They started small. Elijah led Josie around the pen while Mara sat straight-backed in the saddle, knuckles white but proud. She never asked for help mounting, never winced when her knees trembled. She fell once and didn't cry, just stood, dusted her dress, and got back on. That night, over stew, she asked, "Do you believe in evil?" Elijah didn't answer right away, stirred his spoon through the broth. "I believe in pain," he said finally. and in people who forget they can stop causing it. Mara nodded. The man who chained me, she began, voice steadier than it had any right to be. He said he was waiting to make me his wife. Said I needed time to learn obedience. He bought me from someone else. I don't remember their names anymore. Elijah's jaw tightened, but he didn't speak. I tried to fight at first. Screamed so much I lost my voice. Tried to starve myself, until I realized death would be a gift. He told me one day he'd come back for me, but I don't think he meant to. I think he just got bored. A pause. I don't know how long I was there. Years, maybe. My mind made up stories. 1,000 ways I escaped. You were only one of them. Elijah looked at her then, long and clear. You made it real. She shook her head. You did. Neither spoke for a while. Then Mara stood, walked to the window. Her reflection stared back in the glass, faint and flickering like a spirit. I don't want to be looked at like something broken, she said. I'm tired of being pitted. You're not broken, Elijah said. You're unchained. That night, Mara didn't cry. The next morning, they rode out together, side by side, not one leading the other. She wore one of his spare coats, sleeves rolled twice. Her hair was still tangled, but she didn't hide behind it anymore. In town, whispers bloomed like wildfire. A girl, wild-eyed, too quiet, didn't speak much, but stared like she could skin a man with just her gaze. The general store clerk offered her a dress, too bright and too pink. No thank you, she said. The blacksmith's daughter stared. Mara stared back until the girl looked away. But someone else saw her. A man, lean and dusty, boots polished too clean for the road. He watched her from across the street, hat low, eyes sharper than nails. Elijah saw him too. When they left town, the man followed them with his eyes. 3 nights later, Mara awoke from a dream that made her skin cold. She rose, padded barefoot across the wooden floor, and found Elijah sitting on the porch, his rifle across his lap. You feel it too, she whispered. He nodded. He's coming. She didn't ask who. She didn't need to. Instead, she sat beside him, close but not touching. Do you think, she said, barely audible, that I'll have to run again? Elijah didn't answer right away. No, he said at last. I think this time, you get to stay. Mara stared at the horizon. I want to believe you. You don't have to, he replied. Just watch. I'll show you. In the distance, the wind shifted. The stars above them blinked behind slow-moving clouds. And far off, where the hills met the sky, a fire flickered briefly, then disappeared. But neither of them moved. Not yet. The sky wore its bruises in shades of purple and rust as the sun dipped behind the hills, and the prairie seemed to hush in anticipation. Shadows stretched longer than they should, and the wind, usually aimless, carried a scent of smoke. It was the kind of evening where silence didn't soothe but stirred, like a warning written in invisible ink across the land. Elijah stood by the barn, tightening the latch on the stable gate. His fingers moved slow, deliberate, as though the rhythm could ward off what he knew was coming. The horses were restless. Josie kept lifting her head, ears twitching toward the east, toward the place where the trees grew thicker and the trail ran colder. Inside the cabin, Mara braided her hair in the dim firelight. Not neatly, but tightly. She didn't ask questions. Not anymore. She knew how answers sometimes arrived cloaked in footsteps. Elijah entered without a word, set his rifle by the door. She looked at him, and he nodded, just once. A signal between two people who understood what it meant to be hunted. She rose, wrapped herself in his coat. How many, she asked. Hard to say. Could be just one. Could be more. Whoever it is, they know how to hide. She moved to the window, pushing the curtain back with 2 fingers. The trees swayed, but nothing stirred within them. Still, her breath shortened. I remember his whistle, she murmured. He used to do it before opening the cellar. Just a note. Like a bird call. Like it was something joyful. Elijah stepped behind her, not close enough to crowd, but near enough she could feel the quiet steadiness of him. His presence was a blanket against the cold forming in her chest. If I hear it again, she said, I won't freeze. No, he said softly. You won't. They ate together in near silence. Every scrape of the spoon against the bowl felt too loud, too final. The stew was warm, but neither tasted it. They were waiting, though for what, neither could quite say. Later, under a moon that glowed like a lantern behind lace, Elijah walked the fence line. Mara followed, a lantern in her hand, its golden light swaying across the dry grass. The air smelled of pine pitch and something faintly metallic, like blood long dried on old iron. At the edge of the field, they found it. A single boot print in the dirt. Too deep to be casual. Not from someone passing through. Mara knelt beside it, her breath held like a secret. "It's him," she said, not in fear but certainty. "He's here." Elijah crouched beside her, eyes scanning the horizon. "No horse," he muttered. "He's on foot. Or waiting." They returned to the cabin with long strides. Elijah placed a shotgun near the front window, the rifle by the hearth. He lit only one lantern, leaving the rest of the house cloaked in shadow. Mara moved through the space with the grace of someone trained by darkness. She closed the back door, drew the curtains, then stood in the center of the room. "If I face him," she said, voice thin but unshaken, "don't stop me." Elijah met her gaze. "I won't." Then, for the first time, she reached out and touched his hand. Not for comfort, for grounding. "Just don't let me become him," she whispered. "You won't," he replied. "You already walked through fire and came out human." Hours passed. Nothing came. The moon inched across the sky, drawing silver lines through the window slats. The cabin felt like a held breath. And then, a sound. Not loud, just a whistle. One low, lilting note. It slid through the cracks like smoke, slithered into the room and wrapped around Mara's spine like a chain reawakened. She stood. Elijah was already at the window, eyes scanning the brush. "Front porch," he said. She moved beside him. The figure was just a shadow at first. Tall, shoulders squared, coat long and swaying like it remembered a uniform. His face was obscured by the brim of a hat, but the way he stood, it was the same. "You can stay inside," Elijah said, voice taut. "No," she answered. "This is mine." She stepped out, barefoot, her dress brushing the floor like ghost light. Elijah followed, staying just far enough not to eclipse her. The man at the edge of the porch raised his head. His eyes gleamed, pale and small like a blade. "Well now," he drawled, voice slick as oil on water. "Ain't you just a vision?" Mara didn't flinch. "You left me to rot," she said. "Didn't even come back to bury me." "You weren't dead," he said, amused. "Not yet, anyhow." She stepped forward. "You're not the only one who can change someone," she said. "But I chose not to." He tilted his head. "You got fire now. I like that." She took another step. "I don't care what you like." Behind her, Elijah moved, just slightly. His hand hovered near the rifle strap. The man's gaze flicked to him. "This your savior?" "No," Mara said. "I saved myself." The man chuckled. "You think you're free because you got a man with a gun and a bed with clean sheets?" "I'm free," she whispered, "because I stopped being afraid of you." His grin faltered, just slightly. "You still shake." "Yes," she said, lifting her chin, "but I shake while standing." The wind picked up then, stirring the dust around their feet. Josie whinnied in the distance. The man's hand went to his coat. Elijah tensed. But before steel could flash or words could break, Mara spoke again. "I won't kill you," she said, voice heavy with something older than hate. "Because that would make you important." She stepped back. "Leave." For a moment, nothing moved. Then, slowly, carefully, the man lowered his hand. "You got teeth," he muttered. "Won't last." Mara turned and walked back into the cabin. Elijah didn't look away from the man until the figure finally turned and vanished into the dark like smoke into night. Inside, Mara leaned against the wall, hands shaking. He approached quietly. "You did it." She nodded, a single tear sliding down one cheek. "But what if he comes back?" Elijah looked out the window, then back to her. "Then he'll find a different girl," he said, "and a man who won't let her stand alone." She looked up at him, eyes clearer than they'd ever been. "Thank you," she whispered. He didn't answer. Instead, he took her hand. And this time, she didn't let go. Outside, the wind shifted once more, rustling the trees like they were exhaling. And far off, where the earth touched sky, the moon tilted slightly, as though listening. The sky cracked open without warning. A low rumble curled along the valley floor, then rose into a full-bodied thunder that made the windows tremble in their frames. The storm came not like a visitor but a reckoning, riding on blackened clouds that swallowed the horizon. The first drop fell heavy, then another, and soon the rain poured in sheets. as if the earth itself wept for all it had carried too long in silence. Mara sat by the window, her breath fogging the glass. Her hand rested on the wooden frame, fingers tracing idle patterns in the condensation. Outside, the trees bent like old men under the weight of memory, and the world blurred into watercolor gray. But inside the cabin, the fire held steady, and Elijah's quiet presence warmed the room like something sacred. He was fixing the hinges on the back door, humming under his breath. Not a song, not quite. Just the kind of tune a man keeps for himself. The kind that keeps wolves from the door. Mara watched him, her eyes soft, thoughtful. She no longer flinched at sudden noises or hesitated when moving through doorways. But something in the storm stirred old shadows. She turned from the window. "I used to pray for storms," she said. Elijah didn't look up, but his hands stilled. "Why?" he asked. "Because it meant he wouldn't come. He hated mud. Said it ruined his boots." She crossed the room slowly, sat beside him on the floor where tools were spread like a map. Her voice was quieter now. "I knew the sound of every storm that passed over that house. I knew which ones were just noise, and which ones would bring enough flood to keep the door locked for days." Elijah turned the screwdriver gently. "Funny how something awful can become a kind of hope." Mara nodded. The wind whistled through the cracks, and rain tapped against the roof like fingers counting down. "Elijah," she said, "what happens when something dark stops chasing you, but it's still in you?" He paused, wiped his hands on the rag tucked into his belt. "Then you name it," he said. "And once it has a name, you know when it's talking and when it's lying." She looked down at her palms. "What if it tells you you're not worth staying for?" He reached over, slowly, touched the place just above her heart. "Then you let someone speak louder." She didn't cry. Not this time. The tears had burned out, leaving behind something stronger than grief. Just as the wind howled again, a sharp crack rang out from the edge of the property. Not thunder this time. Something else. Splintered wood. A barn door ripped loose. Elijah stood, moving toward the sound without hesitation. Mara followed, pulling on her boots with hands that didn't tremble. The barn groaned under the weight of the wind, its beams flexing like ribs against a great breath. Inside, Josie kicked nervously, eyes wide and rolling. "She's gonna break her leg," Elijah muttered. Mara stepped forward, cooing low and calm. "It's all right, girl. It's just noise. Just Scott." The horse quieted under her voice, muscles still tense, but no longer panicked. "I'll fix the door," Elijah said, heading back out into the gale. But Mara lingered, one hand on the horse's mane, grounding herself in its warmth. That's when she heard it. Not the storm, not the wind. A footstep. Wet, soft, deliberate. She turned, slow as stone. There, in the doorway, stood a man. Not the one from before. This one was older, meaner in the way life makes you, not just choice. His face bore no surprise, just recognition. "Well, I'll be," he said, water running off his hat brim. "Didn't believe the bastard when he said you got away. Thought he was drunk." Mara didn't move. "Elijah," she called, voice sharp. Too late. The man stepped inside, hand on the grip of a rusted revolver. "Don't make a scene now," he sneered. "You ain't no prize to die over." Her heart didn't race. It beat slow, steady, like it finally knew the rhythm of survival. "I'm not the girl you remember," she said. He smirked. "No, you're older. But the eyes don't change." He raised the gun. A shot rang out. But it wasn't from him. He staggered, a bloom of red spreading across his shoulder. Behind him stood Elijah. Rain soaked his shirt, mud streaked his face, but his grip was unwavering. "You walk away," Elijah said, "or the next one finds your heart." The man cursed, teeth bared like a dying dog, and limped back through the doorway, disappearing into the storm like a story too pitiful to end properly. Silence returned like a blanket. Mara let out a breath she didn't know she'd held. She turned to Elijah. "Did you follow me?" "No," he said. "I was never behind you. I was beside you." Back at the cabin, they peeled off wet clothes and wrapped themselves in blankets by the fire. Their hands found each other not out of fear, but out of truth. Outside, the rain began to lighten, the worst of it passing eastward. Elijah looked at her. "You're not running anymore." "No," she said. "I'm remembering how to stay." The fire crackled. A gust of wind lifted the edge of the curtain and let moonlight spill across the floor. It was the same moon as before, but it no longer looked like a watchful eye. It looked like a witness, soft and eternal, Mara leaned into him, her voice low. I want to marry you, she said. Before dawn. Not because I owe you. Not because I'm afraid. But because I want my name to be spoken in a place I chose. Elijah blinked slowly. You sure? She nodded. More than anything. He stood and fetched the small wooden box he kept beneath the bed. Inside was a band of silver, plain and weather-worn. My mother's, he said. She said it brought her peace. He slid it onto her finger. It didn't shine, but it fit perfectly. They stood facing each other as the first light of morning broke through the clouds. The storm had passed. The valley, soaked and shivering, began to steam in the warmth. I give you nothing but this, Elijah said. A roof, a quiet life, and a heart that won't walk away. Mara took his hand. And I give you this, she whispered. My truth, unchained. And whatever comes after. They kissed, not with fire, but with something deeper, like rain on parched earth. Like roots finding their way back home. Outside, the wind had stilled. The world had not changed. But they had. And somewhere inside that silence, a truth took root. That not every storm comes to break you. Some come to wash you clean. If this story stirred something in your heart, let it live a little longer. Like, comment below, and tell me where you're watching from. Tell me what you're healing from. And maybe, just maybe, who helped you find your way out of the cellar. Until next time, keep the fire burning.